All right. Welcome to the Brains and Banter Podcast. We're here with one of my favorite people in the universe, Ethan Herschenfeld. He is an actor. He's a comedian. He's an opera singer. He does it all. So he's been in Pose, The Blacklist, Blue Bloods, Boardwalk Empire, Girls, Gotham, Unforgettable. I can go on. He's also sung at the Metropolitan Opera, Carnegie Hall, and other opera stages around the world. He's really amazing. I think I've watched his stand-up album 4 times now called Thug Thug Jew with 800 Pound Gorilla Records. And it hit #1 on iTunes and Amazon. And it's now available on all streaming platforms. So you should check it out for sure.
And YouTube.
Yeah, and YouTube. Okay.
That's the place. It's free on YouTube.
That's important because I have no money. So I like that. I like
Many people, free, it turns out free is, for almost everyone, free is cheaper than like $6. So yeah, free on YouTube.
That's awesome. Yeah, everything. Also, if anyone's seen the film Red Notice, it's just premiered on Netflix. I think it was like November 12th or something. I don't know if I have that right. And so he is in that as well. And that stars Dwayne Johnson and the Canadian Ryan Reynolds, that hottie, and Gal Gadot, that beautiful human being. Holy shit. And I just can't get over all of the things you've done. So we're just so thrilled to have you here. And
thank you.
Yeah,
thrilled to be here.
Good.
I'm a fan. I'm a fan of you. I'm a fan of your show. And I'm a fan of all the people of whom you're a fan. So
that's awesome. Well, we love you to pieces. Do you want to start maybe just by telling viewers, listeners, your background, how you got into stand-up and opera and the million other things?
In college, I did a lot of theater as a kind of extracurricular and caught the bug that way. Some of that was musical theater. I was pursuing a few different things at once in my 20s, a little bit lost as far as which path. So for a long time there, I really ended up focusing on my singing, and I became an opera singer, and I did that for a long time. I don't do that anymore. I stopped doing that about 5 years ago to focus on the acting and the comedy, and all along I've been acting, lately it's been mostly TV and some films, and been focusing on my stand-up comedy for close to a decade now, so the album you mentioned, Thug Thug Jew, that came out right before the pandemic, and that was exciting, and I'm back to doing some shows and preparing for my second album, so trying to get that new hour together. Yeah.
Amazing. Is that so? Preparing for the new, how long would you say that takes, like to get like an hour worth of material? Is that
if you're George Carlin, I think back in the day it would take a year or two, and then I think Louis C.K. was doing it every year, and it looks like Dave Chappelle comes up with an hour every week. So it just depends, but the normal process would be, I think, several years to come up with an hour. But I'm trying to expedite that because I had a lot of stuff that I had done, and I wrote stuff during the pandemic and performed it on a lot of Zoom shows. So I just did a live show where I did that stuff plus some more new stuff, and that was about a little more than 20 minutes. And then I didn't get to about 6 of the topics that I had prepared for that show. So that means I think I have probably a half hour. So maybe I'm halfway there. I don't know. We'll see. Yeah.
Well, on the way. Do you have to shift gears? Like, is it, do you find it helps? Like, does the opera performance help with the stand-up performance? And like, do you use like techniques that you use from one for the other? Or?
That's a good question. I think, like I said, I stopped singing professionally about 5 years ago, but I believe that certain things I learned as an opera singer, like how to stand on stage and how to orient yourself towards the audience, how to include the audience, that informs how I am on stage, and the things I look for when I see other comedians. I've done some coaching with young comedians to help them write their first sets and get comfortable on stage. And one of the things that I think that comes probably from my theater and opera background, of just being very conscious of always having your eyes visible, and always, I mean, when I say always, it's not 100%, but the idea is that the audience comes in through your eyes. They experience you through their eyes and through their ears. So like comedians some people will have a hat that's throwing a shadow, or someone who has hair that they're constantly dealing with. Like those sort of distractions, which as a singer, you learn that, you have to be unencumbered. This is all your tools for communication are between, your neck and your forehead. So you better, make them available to the audience. And it goes for a comedian as well. The other thing that informs me from theater and really from opera is the importance, the centrality of the words being clear. You got to communicate the words. Everything is the word. The word is everything. In the beginning was the word. I think that's from the New Testament. The idea is like, you got to deliver the words clearly. They have to be audible. They have to be clear because everything's riding on it. And the writing needs to be precise. The other thing that informs, I guess, my performance from music is just the sense of rhythm and ear, what things sound like. That really has a big effect on comedy. I was just working with a student last night on some new jokes that she's preparing for a festival. And a lot of what we were doing was just re-sculpting the jokes, which were already good concepts, good setups, and funny enough punchlines, but they could be made twice as funny by just fixing the rhythm, fixing the word choice, making them rhyme in a certain way, rhyme to the ear, like through repetition of words, as opposed to changing up the word unnecessarily. So yeah, little tools like that come from a sensitivity to the actual word that's critical to opera. Yeah.
It's really interesting to hear you say that, because I feel like opera is written in such a specific dramatic way where there's so much to do with timing. And it's not that every other kind of musical theater and performance doesn't have that. But opera and musical theater in particular, I think to me, make me think timing, clear language, and all of those kinds of things on a whole different level.
Yeah.
So it's neat to hear that. Same thing with the repetition, because it throws me back to improv. Yeah, the rule of 3. If I say the same thing 3 times, it's going to be way funnier than if I change up the word. So I'm really enjoying all of the memories this is bringing me back of when I used to do these kinds of things, and how in high school choir, I had really long hair. And the first time it got in my mouth during choir practice, I never forgot an elastic again.
On the thing of rhythm, of course, when you're singing in an opera or musical theater, you don't have so much of a choice about the rhythm of the words, and so you're locked in to a degree. Of course, you can use different techniques to lengthen a word and then steal back. They call that rubato, or robbing. You rob time from the next measure if you've slowed it down. So musicians use that all the time. So within the framework of a strict rhythm, you can play with it. And like great singers and jazz singers, like Sinatra's famous for that also, sort of hanging back or getting in front of the beat. But you're pretty much locked in with the conductor and with the musicians and the other singers. So when you're doing stand-up, of course, you can do whatever the hell you want. But as you get really comfortable and get to know your material and the jokes get more and more polished and refined, a key part of that is the rhythm. It just comes out. It can come out in a certain way that lands the way it's supposed to and maximizes the laugh. Yeah.
Jenna, I was going to add something, but jump in if you were about to say something. But that made me think of the idea of rhythm and how we're just so sort of tuned to get in tune with one another. And so just thinking about if there are 2 clocks in the same room and then the pendulum just start going together. And I think it's exactly, so I can see how that rhythm is so.
Wait, does that actually happen?
Yeah, totally.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Come on, that's Harry Potter stuff.
It is Harry Potter. It's
come
totally
on.
Harry
Does
Potter.
That really happen?
Harry Potter. It does. It totally. And then again, I think linked to you're talking about the power of words too, and how words can have an actual effect on our immune system and nervous system and all of that too, and how key that is. And then you're talking about rhythm, and then in poetry. So I was going to talk to Naaz and Lyric are both poets, and thinking about how key that is to emotion too. So that if our bodies are getting in touch with the words and everything, and how that has an even more powerful effect on the audience. So Naaz and Lyric, did that speak to you when you were speaking about words, and does that fit in with poetry for you?
Yeah, I was gonna say, when you said that you change certain words or added or, subtracted words. I was thinking about that in terms of like poetry. I'm a spoken word poet, so a lot of it is actually more of a performance than it is like, yeah, the poetry matters, but it's also how are you presenting that poetry. I remember in high school, I used to do competitions where it was like multiple people performing one poem. So we'd play around with the voice. One of us would be like standing back on stage and yelling from the back, or like we'd play around with it. And I feel like that impacted the audience a lot more in our communication and our engagement with the audience. I've also written poems that are kind of supposed to be funny. I don't know if they're funny. I like to think of them as my little comedy sets because I go up on stage and I'll get really serious and then I'll get really just inappropriately like just cracking jokes left, right, and center. But yeah, no, I feel like there's a process in any kind of art, whether that's performance art in the sense that, acting. I was also in musical theater in high school, and I definitely see the intersectionality between all of them. What I learned in musical theater was applied when I was performing a poem on stage. But like I feel like all of those elements in the arts it's a process, and it's needed in its own way in any kind of art form, whether that's acting or comedy or writing, or even I think like because I paint as well, and I feel like there's a process in that too, where like how we were talking about sometimes it's repetition of the word. So like when I'm painting something, I might want to try a different method of doing it, but in reality, if I continue going with the method I am doing, it'll work out better with that specific piece. And I think that's like just the thing we can apply to all of the arts, and I think that's really cool. It's like
Yeah, that also makes me think of my editing process, and my editing process for work too, I suppose. I mean, I give presentations on topics related to mental health and self-growth and self-awareness and things like that. And I do spend a lot of time thinking about what I want to say and having those bullet points and play around with different ways to say it. And sometimes I run it by friends, because depending on where you put the emphasis in a sentence or what specific word choice you use, it can mean completely different things to different people. Even just how are you doing versus how are you doing feels very different.
The tones.
Yeah, it's the tones, it's the emphasis, it's the pause. There's so many layers in it between performance. And I was a musician originally. So when I was 12, I picked up a guitar and learned a million Green Day songs, and then grew up and learned to play other songs that weren't just Green Day and the Beatles. So,
Well, they're both great.
It's a nice place to start, especially really songs I know the words to.
Yeah. One of the levers you can pull on or push on with a joke is, apart from the writing, is just the intonation. And sometimes a joke that isn't working can be fixed just by switching the emphasis, switching the kind of subtext, the attitude. So, yeah.
And do you play? I can't remember if you play instruments too, because you do everything.
Not really. No.
You don't need to. You have that beautiful, booming, amazing voice. So,
thanks. I did. I mean, I know rudimentary piano stuff that I knew enough to teach myself the parts that I had to learn as a singer, but I would have to go to a coach to really learn it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And did you find that the pandemic, being isolated, was it good for your creativity, or do you think it was very detrimental? No, it wasn't.
No, it wasn't good. No, I'm very jealous of people like Isaac Newton and Shakespeare and Gary Steingart, who just came out with a new novel that he wrote in lockdown. Mm-hmm. These people who really could sink in. For me, so much of the process and the joy of the whole thing for me, in whichever activity I'm doing as a performer, so much of it is just being in the room with other people. Yeah. The actual 3D human interaction is, for whatever reason, critical. And so, I've had tons and tons of auditions in the last year that are all now remote. So you record on your phone and then you submit them. And so as opposed to going into a room with casting directors where you read the scene with one of the casting directors, and there's something. I mean, there are some advantages logistically to doing it on your own, but for me that's such a fun, I guess, life affirming part of the process. Just getting on the subway and going to the room and meeting the people and meeting the doorman and then saying hi to the person at the desk and then saying hello and chatting with the person who's the casting director who you're going to read with. All of that stuff is actually, in a way, it's part of the process. It's part of the audition. I think it's part of the impression you make. They can feel your energy and they react to that. And so little things like that are lost in the remote world. I guess it's worth thinking about, are there ways to compensate for that and inject some of that feeling into the remote self-tape emailed audition? But I think, I'm nostalgic, or I'm longing for the return to at least some of that stuff. Totally. Just the messing around, just chatting, just cracking jokes in person with the person. That's really, in some ways, the most fun part of it. And I think that, I don't know if that gets you a job, but it gets you in the right frame of mind to do the audition for sure.
Totally. Yeah.
I think you also mentioned Zoom comedy shows. I'm wondering how those were.
Yeah, those got to be pretty fun, actually. One advantage was, like, we're looking at each other now, everyone is in a front row seat. So if you want to do crowd work, if you want to talk to audience members, you have everyone's face right there. And also you have their names right there, which is amazing. Because as a comedian on stage, you normally can't see, you can't see everyone's face, and you certainly don't know everyone's name. So that was fun. But yeah, there's no substitute for the sound of a laugh in person. And so, yeah, we've been doing some of those. I mean, I don't know what it's like in Western Canada right now, but I heard that in New York City, like, I think 85% of people are vaccinated, at least one dose, like a very high number, and the cases are down. So in a way, I guess it's over, sort of, but then it still feels like I went to a live screening of Red Notice with my mom. We went to a theater in New York, and she's older and she hasn't been going out, so it felt weird being in a movie theater, even though it was pretty empty. But we kept our masks on, and anyway, maybe next year it'll be over.
Oh, hopefully. Yeah. But it's so true that I used to think that I always liked to be isolated, and I was so relieved when I got to do everything from home, but then have realized, I was talking to Lyric and Jenna about this, that I actually love the whole process of, like, going to university, setting up the class, talking with the students. And so it gave me like a renewed appreciation of interacting with other people. And also a friend of mine's recording his book right now for Audible, and he actually has to have someone like sit across from him while he does it, or else he just can't do it, because it's like this need for another body there. And I think that's so interesting that you say that. And and you think there's also something about, like, it's just not the same virtually, right? So we're like getting to see each other, but there's something to being in the same room as someone too, so you can really feel the energy. And
we're social animals. We need people. Yes. We need people to an extent, even though, like, we may, like, I feel like I've noticed, like, there are people that before the pandemic claimed that, I like that alone time. And now a lot of us, even the ones that, like, do like that isolation and do enjoy doing our own thing, kind of crave that human interaction.
Yeah.
I am that person. Yeah. I am the person who, like, got back to writing in the pandemic after ages of not writing, and have been cranking out a ridiculous amount of work compared to the past decade. Yeah, it's been great for me, but I also I'm missing that chance to read it to other people in person. I'm really lucky that I have a circle of poet friends who meets every week, and we hang out and we read work, whether it's our own or somebody else's that we want to share, just to have that chance to perform something for someone and get into that space and into a persona that isn't your own, or is a variation on your own, rather. I think when I read pieces that I write about myself. Do you find that at all with your comedy, that you're a bit of a persona version of you?
That's a great question. And I think most comedians are. Yeah. They heighten, accentuate, focus on certain aspects of their personality that are good for comedy. because that's the job. You have to be up there making people laugh, and certain parts of everyone's personality definitely don't make you laugh. So that is part of the process of getting professional at it or getting more proficient, is identifying what your comedic persona is, and that really comes out through. It was funny, Naaz, when you were saying that you say you do some poems that you think are funny. I was going to say the audience will tell you if they're funny or not. It's unambiguous. So, and when you're starting out as a comedian, it's unambiguous what material, what subjects, what parts of you make people laugh, and what parts don't. So that, I think that process automatically, like water on a stone, like it just it creates whatever sculpture naturally over a long time is the funny one. If you're listening to that feedback, if you were trying to create some other persona, if you're, your persona,
if you want to devastate people,
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
No, if your persona is your poet who just rips people's hearts out and makes them feel that the world is coming to an end and gets them in touch with loss and death and sorrow, then similarly, you listen to that reaction and go in that direction, I guess.
So what do you think helps you then with your comedic persona? What works for you?
So please watch my special, Thug Thug Jew, on YouTube. It's free.
So good.
Thank you. And get the album if you feel like spending $6 or whatever, and leave a comment, share it with people. So you will notice that one of the things is, I think, what exasperates you, what leaves you thinking, how did I get myself into this? Why is the world arrayed against me? I think that's a lot of comedians. That's a kind of opening into their comedic world. Just thinking about what are the things that really drive you nuts, and then the experiences where you've done battle with how difficult and how horrible the world seems to be. So for me, there's also the thing of aggression. I've thought about this, that I can come off sometimes. I can be aggressive sometimes, but also sometimes I can come off as aggressive when I'm not being aggressive. People misperceive me as aggressive because of how I look or how I sound. And so that whole issue of aggression, being aggressive or playing with people's perceptions of aggression, I think that's a big part of my act.
Cool. Yeah, I think you do a really good job of making people laugh about the way the world is stacked against you in Thug Thug Jew. And just because I was re-listening to some of it this morning, when I'm away from home, I would take Schlepp anytime and feel like I'm back in a car with my mom or grandma, just having someone the whole way.
Yeah. So, yeah, that joke, that's right at the beginning of the album, if you listen to it. And I will say that also falls in the file. I've been thinking about this. Sometimes you come up with a joke and you think, wait a minute, is this a good joke or is this actually a good business idea? Like maybe this is joke or startup. Like maybe it's both. Maybe I got a good joke, but now I can launch a startup. But I'm not an entrepreneur, so it's they're jokes. But I guess if someone wants to go into business, I'd be happy to do the voiceover.
Maybe not Schlepp, but if you come up with something else, it's my jam.
Yeah.
Ethan, do you feel like, so all of this experience then is heightened your ability to read people? Because I think that sounds like it's so key, like empathy. And so you have to be able to read the crowd and understand how they're reacting. And do you feel that's kind of part of the work of this?
I hope so. Yeah, I aspire to be tuned into other people. I try, and often I fail. But yeah, I think I am someone who's always been keyed into how is everyone reacting.
Yeah, totally.
I think that's probably also common to a lot of comedians. How is everyone reacting? How are they perceiving me? What can I do to? And I think that's where my getting laughs instinct came from. Being uneasy, being uncomfortable, trying to diffuse tension or trying to diffuse aggression by cracking a joke. Mm-hmm. So definitely there's a lot of that. The antenna are up because the world feels dangerous, threatening, maybe deadly. And so one very useful tool for getting out of those pickles is getting people to smile or laugh.
I
So
love
yeah.
that. Yeah. And you can get so anxious, and like it's a good thing, like the ability to empathize and read people. But then the other, you can get so caught up and like be like, oh, are they thinking this? So then and then you try and readjust what you're doing to it's but you are so, like, from meeting you, like that's my mom said it too. Just you seem to really tune into what people are saying. And
Well, thanks. I think it can be to an extreme or to a fault. It's definitely something that you have. It's a good tool, but it's also it can be limiting if you're so focused on how am I being perceived? How am I being perceived? The nice thing, like I was saying to Naaz again, is when you're on stage and your job is very circumspect. It's just get them to laugh. That's really great because very quickly you're tuned into that the whole time. When you're on stage, you're tuned into that. Are they laughing? Are they laughing? Are they laughing? Did they laugh at that? How big was that laugh? Did they? Why didn't they laugh? You're like a laugh meter up there. And hopefully then you're learning for the next time up how to make it even funnier.
I have a question that's a little more, I guess, off topic because we're in it deep right now. You talked about like following crowds and if they're laughing or not. Have you ever had, like, you'll throw a joke out in one crowd and they'll love it. They'll react. They'll be like, yeah, this is great. Right. And then you try that same one on another crowd and they're like,
yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely. I think any comedian will tell you that happens. And then the question becomes your sample size. Like, you don't want to judge the joke based on 1 or 2 or 5 reactions. Maybe 5, you can start to judge it if it's not getting laughs. But one instinct can be to blame the audience. Like, you'll even hear young comedians on stage doing that. They'll say after a joke that doesn't go well, they'll say, oh, that was over the line, or, oh, and now you're, you draw the line at, I don't know, whatever the topic was, which I always think like, nah, you're taking the easy exit. You told the joke, you didn't get the laugh. It's not. So, like, blaming the audience is a problem. So it can be a question of geographically, if a joke is specific to a certain region, or if it's very local, or if it's a dated joke, like maybe you told a joke that it was a subject that was on the tip of everyone's brain when you told it. A month later, you're telling it, and people are like, okay, yeah, we don't care about that guy anymore. He's not in the news. So yeah, it's a living, breathing art form in that regard. So
you also mentioned how jokes and just being an overall funny person can help lighten the mood when there's like, a darker atmosphere. On the contrary, how do you feel about making jokes about darker things or kind of bringing up darker things with it, whether it's like what's happening in society or just like in general darker concepts, but like kind of bringing it as a topic through comedy?
I think that's.
What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's a really powerful thing to do. Many, many comedians do it, and it's a powerful way to explore some. I don't know if you saw Cecily Strong on Saturday Night Live like 8 days ago. She did on Weekend Update, she did a bit where she played a clown who was talking about her own abortion. And it was magic. It was incredible. It was so hard hitting and hilarious and devastating. It was amazing. So yeah, that's absolutely one of the great, let's say, uses of comedy, to shed light on some really dark, heavy topics that if you come at them directly, it can be maybe demoralizing, or it feels like that's a way to approach stuff. I certainly do that with ideas of like prejudice and gun control. I have a bit about gun control. That is one of my favorite things that I do. It's near the end of the album. But that's a topic that I find also the subject of Israel, which is, to me, there's so much tragedy there, and it's a subject that I am very passionate about, but had to kind of disengage from to a large degree because I find it just so depressing. But the only way I can engage with it now is through my comedy, basically. So to try to shed light and raise questions and bring up things through comedy. So yeah, that's a big yes to approaching the darkness through the comedy. Yeah.
I think it's extremely important because it, like, I feel like it's like a like a sugar with the medicine kind of thing. It makes
Oh, well,
things
that right.
easier to take for people
Yeah.
and almost allows conversation to flow, because sometimes people don't want to talk about things, but then when you slide it in a sneaky way, the conversation happens and it sparks.
It's funny when you describe it that way. It sounds a little more like, I wouldn't say necessarily polemic or propaganda, but it's sort of going at it with an intention other than the laugh. Whereas in comedy, I think historically the intention is the laugh. However, I will say that there are people working today at the top of the comedy universe who are doing what you're saying. They are, Hannah Gadsby, and I would also say Dave Chappelle. I know he's mired in controversy right now, but what he's doing now, he is, even if you vehemently disagree with where he lands, he's doing what you're talking about. He's approaching the topic. It's almost like the comedy in some of those specials and some of the sections of those specials. It's like you're saying, the comedy is almost like the delivery mechanism for the vaccine. So that's really, that's an astute observation. It's not how I do it, because I'm just a mercenary. I'm just trying to get the laughs. That's all. I'm just trying to get the laughs. But I do think about that. A lot of comedians do. How can I change the world a little bit with this? Not just.
Do you think that with the platform as an artist or just a creator in general, because I would count you as one, do you think there's almost an obligation to touch on those kind of things?
No.
Or do you think it's like no, you can kind of do whatever?
I don't think so. I mean, that's just me, but I don't think so. I think there's so many ways to make art or to be creative or to do whatever you want to do. And there's so many ways to bring creativity to jobs that people normally wouldn't think of as a creative job. Everyone has an opportunity to be creative. Like you were talking at the beginning, it's just about human interaction and bringing awareness and bringing joy and maybe light, or bringing whatever it is that you're bringing. That's creative. Just every interaction, I think, is an opportunity to do that. One of my grandfathers worked he had a shop where he fixed the springs on trucks and on buses and on cars. That was his job. He did that passionately 7 days a week for 50 years or so. And he was a joke cracker. He was a yarn spinner. I feel like he was just a creative guy. He didn't do a job that anyone would say, oh, he's a creative. They didn't have that word as a noun back then anyway, but he wasn't a creative, but he was a creative. He was absolutely like a clown in his way, and lighthearted, and he really was, I think, so that was an answer that petered out into,
No, I like that. It's true though. I do feel like the idea of like a creative or of a creative or a creator kind of like has recently been more normalized or thrown around out there. Mm-hmm. But I think that overall, there are people before that word was even a thing that were just genuinely creative in their life. My grandma was similar. She was just always making stuff,
Right.
She was always DIYing. She was always sewing. She was always doing something. And there wasn't necessarily a word for that in her generation or the time that she was doing that. But she was like coming up with fashion pieces, but I wasn't calling her a fashion designer.
Right.
You know what I mean? But she was creating her own thing. I think that's like, there are people out there. It's just now that it's more, I guess there's a more like, there's labels for it now, if anything, right? We have a label now, and we can throw that label around. But I think that
DIY is a funny label, because it's like DIY is, if you go back 50 or 80 years, everyone was
DIY.
There was no one else to do stuff for you. So.
Exactly.
It was either DIY or don't do it.
It was exactly do it yourself or just don't.
Forget it. Yeah.
Is part of the reason you keep going then? Like, do you find is it a struggle sometimes what you're doing? And do you see it as kind of like, as like a form of service too? And is that what keeps you going, what you're doing?
I try to think about that. I had a friend who once said that when it was very difficult with the singing, getting that whole thing going. She was just saying to me, you have this gift, you got to develop it and then share it with the world. That's it. If you can try to take yourself out of it and think about it like that, that can be helpful. It's a bit of on some level, that's not fair. I was going to say it's a mental trick. It's not really, because that is what it is. It is there to it's a way to, give people pleasure, take their mind off of stuff, give them a laugh, give them an artistic experience. But it is hard not to get wrapped up in your own mishigas. Like this last year, especially doing tons of auditions. Like I said, it's been, and then not being able to get on stage the last year and a half, with some exceptions. But so it can be a real struggle. Yeah. And I think what keeps me going, if I'm not able to engage with that idea of service, is just knowing that even though it's really hard and it can be dispiriting when you're not getting the opportunities you want, just knowing and trying to hold on to the feelings that you've had doing it in the past. Just to know, you know what, I love that. Like I can tune in a little bit to that past experience, and just to know that in a fundamental way, I'm a performer. I really like performing. It energizes me. And so just knowing that even if the opportunities don't come as frequently as I'd like, or in the way that I would imagine in my utopia, well, too bad. Just keep going, and the opportunities will, something will happen. So that's it. But it's a strong idea. I totally approve of that idea of thinking of it as service, for sure.
Well, that's such an important mental health technique too, though, being able to go back. You've really inspired me too, because you have all these other techniques too, to cope too with anxiety and all that stuff that comes with performing, diving into freezing cold water every day. I was wondering if you could tell people about how you do that, because I think it's brilliant and impressive as hell.
All right, thanks. Just let me say this first, and then I'll talk about the swimming. When you're talking about remembering, trying to get into a past emotional frame of mind, I was just rereading a collection of stories by Murakami. It's the one from last year called, I think, First Person Singular, and the story is called With the Beatles. The story is called With the Beatles, but it's very much about he's an adult, but this one moment, this one memory from his teenage years where he was overcome with this particular emotion. There was a visual that went with it. He was overcome with it. And years later, he can't get that out of his head. And he's able to tune back into that and call up those feelings. It's a story about that feeling and that ability to call those things up. It's really great. As far as the swimming, I started just trying to stay sane. I normally in normal times when I'm in New York, I swim with a group of people daily. And up here in Cape Cod, that wasn't possible, but there's the bay and there's the ocean. The bay is calmer, and I started last year. I've done it a few times in my life, but then last year, January 1st, or I guess it was the beginning of this year, January 1st, I decided I'm going to jump in the water every day, just for a second or a minute or whatever it is. And I started doing that. I did it till early or mid-April. Into the coldest. It never got freezing, so the cold water was not freezing. It's normally in the 40s. The coldest it got was on March 7th. It was 37 degrees. That was the coldest. But now it's in the mid 50s. And so last Tuesday, so a week ago, I started doing it again. And I just go in for a few minutes. I wear a hat and keep my head out of the water, and just like an old guy at the YMCA, just breaststroke with the head out, or a little bit of backstroke with the head out. But what I learned after the fact, when I started doing it, and then when I wasn't feeling great after I stopped doing it in April, I saw that there are some things you can read, I guess some research about the mood benefits of the cold water immersion. And specifically, they say it's the vagus or the vagus nerve that comes out of your head and goes into many parts of your body, and apparently is connected with all sorts of functions and feelings. And
it's a rest and reset nerve. It's super duper interesting. And it's one of those that it kind of connects the gut brain function. It'll help with the things that help you rest when you're asleep. It's one of those ones that a bunch of people who meditate will try to create meditations around. If you're into that sort of thing, there's some fascinating neuroscience on it. The vagus nerve is it's so cool. Wow. Definitely worth reading about.
Cool. So apparently getting it very cold is one of the ways to stimulate it and have all sorts of mood benefits. And for me, who's prone to low moods, I think unbeknownst to me, I was combating that by just chilling that nerve daily. So what I've started to do now is instead of just doing the breaststroke with the head out of the water, then I'll go on my back and with my hands and feet under the water, just kind of, what they call that sculling, or, so, but what that does is I notice is it kind of submerges the back of my neck up to my sort of hairline there. And so I'm consciously thinking, okay, let's freeze that vagus nerve a little bit more. So I do a few minutes of that also. So as they say in Yiddish, it couldn't hurt. It could help. It definitely doesn't hurt, so I keep doing it.
It's amazing. And it causes neurogenesis as well. You got all the dopamine, neurogenesis. Yeah, you inspired me. I've started swimming again, and it's changed my mental health too, especially if I know something's making me smarter. That always makes me feel better too. I'm like, I'm diving into this freezing cold water. I'm going to turn into a genius. Let's keep doing this. Yeah. It is. And Wim Hof too? I think we've talked about that, but his techniques, it makes me think of that too. And it is such an important mental health technique. Do you have other things you do to help? I guess your dogs, are they a mental health thing too? Do they help you with that?
Absolutely. Yeah. They will listen to me complain.
That's good.
Try to do a daily Zoom workout in the mornings with a group. And then we started in March doing a quick one at 6 p.m. also, but lately I've fallen off of that, but they've kept doing it. But it's not super aerobic, that morning workout. It was a pandemic thing where you're just on a mat or standing up doing various things. But I know it's very important to get that heart rate way up for a few minutes a day. And I'm less religious about that. When I'm in New York and I swim with my friends, then that happens. There's that. We start our workout with something that's great. My friend Miho, who's an artist, she introduced the group, to this thing called Radio Taiso, Taiso, Radio Taiso. It's a Japanese workout. It takes 6 minutes, and in Japan, apparently, it happens every morning at 6:30 a.m. on the radio or on TV. So everybody, no matter where you are, you can just stop and do it. And you don't need any equipment or a mat or anything. One of my friends who joined, she said it's sort of like Romper Room, which was a kids show when we were kids, where you just sort of do these little exercises. It looks like old-timey calisthenics, and it's definitely low impact, but it's fun, nice, quick, and addictive. So it's called Radio Taiso, or Japanese radio gymnastics, and I totally recommend it. You can do part 1 in 3 minutes, part 2 in 3 minutes, and the whole thing in 6 minutes. So on YouTube.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, I want to start joining you for that.
Please. Yeah. Oh, anyone watching this who wants, just find me through this podcast or through my website, and I'll send you the link to the morning workout. It's 9 a.m. Eastern, but we do have some West Coasters who join us, so they get up in the dark.
Yeah.
Quite a few people in Washington State through one of the friends in Brooklyn. So, yeah.
I mean, I'm Central. That's not a bad time for me. That's pretty convenient.
6 a.m.? Oh, where are you?
I'm in Winnipeg, so I'm Central time.
Oh, you're Central.
It's not quite that bad. Everybody else is far early, but I'm like, that's not terrible. 7. I could do 7.
Oh, please join. Please join. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been saying I would join forever.
I'm putting my email address in the chat and inviting you to email me for the link.
Great, thank you. I will take you up on that.
Yeah, this will be the time when I finally join.
No pressure.
I feel like it's nice to have a routine too.
Yeah.
It like boosts your confidence. I think we were talking about this lyric before, like just knowing that, hey, I did a little bit of something each day, and yeah.
Absolutely.
I like the smallest thing, the next smallest thing. It's so much more accessible. And once you start doing the smallest thing, sometimes it's easier to get going bigger.
Definitely.
Exactly.
And I needed that. That's why this 9 a.m. workout became such a thing. We all needed it during the lockdown. There's another thing I learned, which I don't put into practice as I should, but there's a thing called like a chain habit, I think they call it, where you just link the new activity to whatever the existing one is. So if you, like in my many attempts to become a regular meditator, the teacher in Michigan who I listened to, he was saying, just link it to, for example, do you brush your teeth every night? Okay, so then after the teeth brushing, which definitely happens every night, then add the 5 minute or whatever it is of meditation to the teeth brushing. Or, I have a friend who's added a mantra to his shower because he definitely showers every morning. So he makes sure to do this mantra in the shower. So you're just linking the one thing to the other. It's said to be a powerful, effective way to do it. So
it's been effective for me. If that helps anyone, I can stand by that technique.
Yeah. All right. Yeah.
Amazing. I have to try that. I'm going to switch gears for a minute just because I want to hear more about all the work you've been doing too. Ethan, do you mind telling us more about your role in Red Notice? Is that what it's called? Yeah, in Red Notice.
Well, Red Notice. Sure. So it's a movie on Netflix. Very exciting because right now it's number one on Netflix in every country where Netflix exists. So that's exciting. I can't take any credit for that. My role is brief, but it's very exciting to be part of something that gets a lot of views and that gives people a lot of enjoyment. It's a very fun movie. It's an action comedy. It stars Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, Gal Wonder Woman Gadot, and Ryan Deadpool Reynolds. So they are three. I think Netflix was clever in casting the three biggest movie stars in the same movie, and me, and people are watching it and loving it. It got pretty scathing reviews from some people, but I was thinking, like, you know what, that's not going to matter because this is just a super fun movie, and I don't think the Netflix viewers are particularly swayed by reviews. I don't think that's how it functions. You just start watching on Netflix and you're like, is this fun? I'm going to keep watching. And that's how it works. So what is my role? My role, I play an Egyptian billionaire. And one fun thing in the movie is that I didn't know until I took my mom to see it in a live screening at the Paris Theater 2 weekends ago. I didn't know that. I thought I was near the beginning of the movie because of the function of my character in the plot. But it turns out I'm later in the movie. And that was fun because at various moments, the characters, including those superstars, are talking about the Egyptian billionaire, like this thing about the Egyptian billionaire. So it's like getting brought on stage by Jerry Seinfeld in comedy. Like, okay, they're saying my character's name. So that was cool. And then I was very happy how the scene came out. It's a fun scene. It's a big scene. Lots of background actors and men painted gold in loincloths and a big superstar pop star who's in the scene. No spoilers. And my friend now Brenna, who plays my daughter, she has great moments. And the director Rawson, who's done a bunch of these blockbusters, he made Dodgeball, writer director. He's amazing, and he was great, and got to work with him, and then got to work with him in the reshoots. We went down again months later to reshoot and to shoot another scene. We shot an extra scene where my daughter is getting a dress fitted, and that scene didn't end up making it into the movie, which was interesting because we went for a whole extra trip to Atlanta to shoot this thing. We also did some reshoots then of the existing scene. And then I went to Boston to record voice. So it was so much. So what's interesting is just to see how much goes into these things. And then great scene, very happy with it. Not a huge, long scene, but it's a big moment. And to see how much... It's very fun being part of one of these productions. Also doing the TV jobs is very fun because you plug in for a few days or whatever the time is to a machine. Just lots of people working together to get this thing done. It's a cool feeling. The experts, the technicians, the lighting, the camera, the props, the grips, the people, just every little thing is taken care of, and there's someone who's devoted to that. The makeup, the hair, the costumes. It's really fun. It's like being part of an ant colony. Yeah,
that's such an interesting way to put it.
Yeah. This
filmed during the pandemic, right?
It did. It was November last year. It filmed a few times, but my time down there was October, November last year. So it was pre-vaccine, and so everyone was wearing masks until the cameras rolled, and everyone was tested every 48 or 72 hours. You got a test, and we were isolated to our hotel area or the movie studio area, and you had to get your card scanned in when you left the hotel and when you arrived at the studio, and you would be flagged if it took too much time. You weren't allowed to even stop at a gas station. It was they would fill up your tank, and they took extreme precautions, and as a result they had no cases, it was also instructive in just how effective public health measures could have been to stop this thing in its tracks, but people were unwilling to follow those measures. But in a private profit motive driven environment where there was no time to spare, or if you lost time, it was going to cost millions of dollars a day. People just did what they had to do, and there were no cases. So that's depressing that we as a society and as countries were unwilling to take those very simple measures, really. It's pretty simple if you just wanted to do it. Wear a mask when you're indoors. That was it.
Yeah, it must have been really interesting going from the isolation to being part of a community with such intense restrictions, but getting to be around people and work together to build something after that time on your own. How did that feel?
Yeah, that was great. It was fun. It was a huge relief. It changed my mood 180 degrees, and it was great. So can't wait for the next one. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I love what you're saying too, just how like when we come together in groups, we're like this super organism and speaks to, again, the idea of how we're just these social creatures and how when we come together and do what we're meant to do, which is to cooperate, we create these magnificent works of art. And how much prep does it take then? So for you to prep for what you were doing, like how long did you spend on that?
That was a lot because when I first auditioned, it was in English, but then they asked my agent, can he do it in Arabic? And I was studying Arabic at the time. I'm not anywhere near fluent or even proficient, but I'm a very good parrot, and I had learned quite a bit. So I was like, yeah, I can do that. So I got someone to translate it for me and coach me in it. So then I laid down the audition a second time in Arabic. So when I got there, I thought that I was doing the role in Arabic. And in fact, we shot it that first night. We shot multiple takes, some in English and some in Arabic. So it took a lot of preparation. The interesting thing was that just a week or two, maybe a week before, when I was already in Atlanta, a week before, I got in touch with a coach who was Egyptian and was pointing out that basically the Arabic that I had prepared was what they call like classical Arabic, which no one really speaks. I was doing it in this very antiquated, so I had to quickly get a coach to help me do it in more colloquial Arabic. But then this other coach I got, who was Egyptian, taught it to me, and there was no way for me to learn that quickly after having the classical one and then a more like Syrian or Palestinian Arabic, having learned that. Egyptian is its own dialect with a lot of its own words, and so if I had it to do over again, well, in the end we didn't even do it in Arabic, we did it in English. But bye Naaz, great to talk with you. If I had it to do again, I would take a few months to work with an Egyptian coach. It's its own dialect, yeah.
Yeah, there's so much that goes into it, and yeah, just like I can't imagine, just learning a language in itself, but then all the differences and dialects as well. It would be in your brain because when you learn the one, you'd have had to train your brain and then work out those neural pathways. So then all of a sudden, like not too long later, like, oh shit, nope, that's not it. We gotta start fresh. So yeah, that is.
They say that also with music. It's very important to learn it correctly the first time, because once you get it in there incorrectly, it's in there. Yeah.
What are you most proud of all the things you've done? You've done so much.
Oh, thank you. You're very generous, and well, I'm flattered. Thank you. I think I would say the comedy album, Thug Thug Jew, that feels like kind of a capping achievement on all the work I've done for the comedy and also all my performance work to a degree. I'm very proud of the album and the special, so please watch it. And I'm proud at the moment to be part of this film, Red Notice. It's really cool that, people all over the world are watching it and enjoying it. I'm very happy with my work in it, and so that's cool.
Yeah, I'm sure that scene is the highlight of the movie. I cannot wait.
Oh, well, it's not, but thank you. For my mom, it was. Oh my God, there he is.
Yeah, that must have been. Did you have fun watching it, like the live screening? Is she like that?
Yeah, it was fun. Yeah. We had the whole theater. We had this gorgeous old theater to ourselves until a few people arrived, and we had a great time. It was fun.
That's awesome. Is your mom? I can't remember. Is your mom? Does she act at all, or what does she do?
She's got a lot of creative abilities, and she's funny, and she likes puns. She likes wordplay, and she writes, and she loves music. So yeah. Both my parents have creative spirits. So thank you. Thanks, Jenna. Thanks, Lyric, and thanks, Dr. Bryn Jones Square.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ethan. This has been awesome. I really appreciate your insight into the nuances that go into a lot of these things.
Thank you very much. And it's fun to hear everyone's perspective. And I look forward to doing this in person in 2022. Let's make it happen.
Yes.
Manifest it. Yep.
Maybe we'll see you to work out sometime.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
9 a.m. on
All
Zoom.
right.
Email me for the link. Okay.
All right. We love you.
You guys all look great. Love you.
All right.
And I'll see you soon.
Talk
Bye.
to you
See ya.
soon. Bye.